morning, parents and students. Hope you're doing well. This is our reading fluency, our passage. This is a real good example of introduction, body, and conclusion. This passage opens up with a good introduction of who did what, when, and where, and a little bit of a story, and then a real thought and reflection at the end, which kind of closes it into a complete essay. It's fictional, so that means it's imaginary, and we're going to be doing imaginary narratives for the next 10 weeks and looking at how the author constructed them. Here's our reading fluency for week 19, and this is relatively straightforward. There's not a lot of words here that are too difficult, so remember, we can always number the paragraphs. And students that are having difficulty reading through this, they can read a paragraph that's easier for them and then just keep on adding paragraphs that are a little bit more difficult. For those of you who get through it, but your reading fluency is a little bit slow, like it's not 120 to 140 words a minute, you can use a piece of paper or a card, and as you read a sentence, slide that card down and keep on trying to read more words that are hidden by the card each time, and that will increase your reading pace. Now, we aren't trying to read like, we're being chased by a lion. We're just reading in which people can understand what we're reading and we feel confident about our reading. That's what we want to succeed at. So this is a first read. I'll go ahead and start. Times were challenging in Rudy's neighborhood. Neighborhood is kind of a big, long word. This is how it's spelled. You may have already known this word, but that might be a word that you want to underline. Everybody knows what neighborhood is. Sometimes they look at the word and they didn't know that it was that long. Many folks had lost their jobs and struggled to pay bills. It's almost like the situation we're doing right now with the COVID-19. People are losing their jobs because we don't want people in close contact with each other because we don't want the virus to spread. Things are especially tough for Rudy's big family. His parents formerly had good jobs, but now they were unemployed. Now they were unemployed part-time and didn't earn much money. But now they were employed part-time and didn't earn much money. So this is my first read through this, so I'm going to make mistakes, just like you guys do. Yet Rudy's family was an optimistic bunch. That might be a difficult word for each of us. His parents hid their worries and concerns. They made sure that their kids were decent students and neighbors. Elderly Miss Hendricks lived alone next door. She often watched Rudy and her siblings as their parents worked. I think you might know what this is, but maybe you don't know how to spell it. Siblings is cousins and your brothers and sisters. She seemed like a grandmother to them. During these hard times, neighbors put share boxes on their porches. The boxes had extra food, books, DVDs, and other things that neighbors shared with each other. What a great idea. Not such a good idea right now because we're in a pandemic, but something to think about when that's over. You don't have to buy new all the time. People share things. Neighbors could take what they needed. When they finished a book or a DVD, they put it in their share box for someone else to use. One Saturday, Rudy found a great DVD in Miss Hendricks's share box. Miss Hendricks yelled through her screen door, "Enjoy it, Rudy. My son sent it to me." When Rudy got home, he discovered an open envelope in the DVD box. The word Mom was printed on it. In it was $100. Rudy knew right away that Mom was Miss Hendricks. Some kids would think their family could use $100 and keep it, but not Rudy. He returned it immediately. Another long word. Miss Hendricks hugged him and said, "I am not surprised that I lost it or that you, Rudy, returned it." Excuse me. So this down here kind of has a lesson to it, doesn't it? So this is our conclusion, if you remember. And a conclusion is a thought or a reflection or a memory. In this case, it's a lesson. So that kind of closes this passage. It says, this is the end of the passage, and this is what we learned from Rudy's good deed. Now here's our introduction. Now our introduction should have a who, did, what, when, and where. Times were challenging in Rudy's neighborhood. A who is Rudy. Did what? Many folks had lost their jobs. I guess they're going to talk about their jobs and struggled with their pay. That's kind of what's going on right now. That's what the who part. When? They don't really mention a when. So this is kind of mentioning a time. It says tough times, but it doesn't tell us what times. Like, give us a date or something like that. Or a day that this occurred. So it's missing time. Who did what? Rudy, his family lost his job. The did what's going to come in here. When and where? Well, in his neighborhood. So this is still our introduction. It's missing a few things. The introduction could be 2 sentences, maybe. Things were especially tough for Rudy and his big family. So maybe the introduction is both these sentences. Or paragraphs, I'm sorry. It's almost like it's 2 of these paragraphs. So it says, it tells us a little bit more about his family, and that things were especially tough for Rudy. Still doesn't give us a time in here. But it sets us up for the body. Here's the body of this is where most of the details are. This is where the story is actually told. And then our conclusion, of course, is our lesson. All right, so let's go ahead and write our words over here. It's kind of tough to fit in there. Optimistic. Concern. Or concerns. Decent. This word has cent like a coin. D, and the C has an S sound. Decent. Siblings. And then down here, immediately. Now, let's look at the genre a little bit. We have to ask ourselves our first 2 big categories. Is this something that was imaginary, or is this something that is non-imaginary? Some people say true or not true, but that's not how we should be thinking about it. We should be thinking about things that are non-imaginary. In other words, is it something that we experience with real people at a real time in a real event? Or is it something that an author came up with in their imagination? Now this seems like it really happened, but actually an author imagined Rudy and his neighborhood and his elderly neighbor, Miss Hendricks. So when it's imaginary, it's called fiction. Now how they wrote this, there's quotation marks, so these fictitious people are actually speaking to each other. That's called dialogue. We're going to put that in the craft and structure over here. So this lends itself as if it's a narrative, except Rudy's not telling the story. Some person kind of floating above the situation and watching it, almost like a deity, like a god, is watching this happen. Again, it's the author that's actually watching it happen, that's actually happening in their mind. But we say that person that's actually watching this and writing about that is a third person. They can be anywhere at any time. They know what people think. They know what people's feelings are. But this is also written in a narrative style because it has dialogue. Just like many shows you see on TV where people speak, and they aren't. They're imaginary, they're created shows. We call that a narrative type of genre. Now, craft and structure, it starts at one time and ends at another time, kind of sets up that he goes over to the share box and picks something up and then finds something and then goes back to Miss Hendricks. So do you remember what it calls when something follows a certain order? We call it a sequence. Now, if this had dates and the order of the sequence was far apart, we call that chronological order, like we do with trees. And remember chronology with trees? We call that chronological order when it takes place over a long period of time, like history. That's really about it for this. I'd like to say it's almost like, because it gives us a lesson here, that there might be another type of way of looking at this, but let's just keep it like that for now. Okay, so we have some vocabulary here. We have optimistic. Some of you might not know what that is. Concern. I took the S off because you probably weren't going to find it in the dictionary with an S. Decent. Huh? And siblings. And possibly immediately. All right, now if you find this reading too difficult, then break it down into smaller paragraphs, the ones that you could be more successful at, like maybe paragraph 6, and start at paragraph 6. And then add paragraph 7 or 5 and just start to build up. Maybe you just want to start at paragraph 3 and read paragraph 3. If you're reading this all the way through, 120 to 140 words a minute, you can read a little bit faster if you're a really good reader. And please practice this over this short week that we have.